There's a gap between what people think survival looks like and what actually kept people alive when everything broke down. World War II exposed that gap in the harshest way possible. Supply chains failed, cities were cut off, and ordinary families had to survive without the systems we rely on today. And yet millions made it through, not because they had stockpiles of advanced gear, but because they mastered something far more reliable. They built simple, repeatable systems that produced food continuously, even in the middle of disruption. What's surprising is that many modern preppers overlook these methods. They focus on storage, gadgets, and worst-case scenarios, while ignoring the one thing that proved itself under real pressure: sustainable, low-tech food production that works in limited space, in poor conditions, and with minimal inputs. This is not theory. This is what actually worked when survival was no longer optional. Let's break it down. This survival method worked because it produced food instead of just preserving it. During World War II, people quickly learned that stored food only buys time. Once it runs out, you either have a way to produce more or you don't. That's why so many households turned to small-scale growing systems, especially cold frames and compact garden beds. Cold frames were simple wooden boxes with glass or plastic covers that trapped heat and protected crops from harsh weather. They allowed people to grow greens even in winter, extending the growing season when fresh food would otherwise disappear. The key here is continuity. Rather than, relying entirely on stored goods, families created a steady supply of fresh food that could be harvested regularly. That reduced dependence on rationing and, it kept nutrition levels stable. You can actually apply this by building a basic cold frame using scrap wood and a clear cover. Just place it in a sunny spot, plant hardy greens like spinach or kale, and keep an eye on the moisture levels. Within a few weeks, you'll have a renewable food source that works even in the colder months. These systems thrived because they were simple and adaptable. One of the biggest strengths of WWII survival methods was honestly their simplicity. They didn't require electricity, complex tools, or any specialized knowledge. People just used what they had: old windows, discarded materials, and a bit of basic soil preparation to create functional growing systems. Cold frames, for example, could be adjusted based on available space. Some were built in backyards, others in courtyards, or even on rooftops. The goal wasn't perfection, it was reliability. Modern preppers often overlook this because they're drawn to more advanced solutions. But, complexity can fail. Simplicity, when done right, is actually harder to break. To put this into practice, start with a single growing unit. Don't overcomplicate it. Just focus on learning how temperature, sunlight, and watering affect your plants. Once you understand the basics, you can expand gradually. They focused on fast-growing, high-yield crops that made a real difference. Another reason these systems worked is that people chose the right crops. They didn't waste time on plants that took too long or produced too little. Instead, they focused on fast-growing greens and vegetables that could be harvested multiple times. Spinach, lettuce, radishes, and certain herbs became staples because they grew quickly and provided essential nutrients. In a survival situation, speed really does matter. The faster you can produce food, the less pressure you face. You can follow the same approach by selecting crops with short growth cycles. Plant them in succession, meaning you stagger planting times so something is always ready to harvest. This creates a continuous flow of food instead of just a single harvest. This approach reduced reliance on fragile supply chains. WWII made one thing clear: centralized systems are vulnerable. When transportation breaks down or resources are redirected, access disappears quickly. People who depended entirely on external supply chains suffered the most. Those who adapted by producing their own food, even in small amounts, had a critical advantage. They weren't immune to hardship, but they had options. Today, the same principle applies. Food systems are more complex than ever, which also makes them more fragile. Relying solely on them is a risk. A practical step is to treat your food supply as a combination of storage and production. Keep basic reserves, but also develop the ability to grow at least part of your food. Even a small output can reduce pressure and, well, increase resilience. The real advantage was the mindset behind the method. What truly set World War II survivors apart wasn't just what they did, it was how they thought. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. Instead, they worked with limitations and adapted constantly. Cold frames, small gardens, and improvised systems were all part of a larger mindset focused on problem solving and efficiency. People learn to observe, adjust, and improve based on results. This is where, honestly, many modern approaches fall short. It's easy enough to collect gear and store supplies, but without the ability to adapt, those preparations have limits. To build this mindset, you've got to practice regularly. Don't wait for a crisis. Grow something now, even if it's small. Pay attention to what works and what doesn't. Treat it as a skill, not just a backup plan. Why is this proven method still ignored today? Despite its effectiveness, this approach doesn't get much attention. It's not flashy, and well, it doesn't sell products or promise quick results. It requires effort, patience, and consistency. But that's exactly why it works. World War II proved that survival isn't about having the best tools. It's about using what you have in the smartest way possible. Cold frames and small-scale food production aren't outdated ideas. They're tested solutions that remain relevant in any situation where resources are limited. If you're serious about survival, don't ignore what history has already proven. Start building systems that produce, not just store. Learn the skills that kept people alive when everything else failed. Subscribe to Endgame Survival for more real, practical knowledge drawn from history. And share this with someone who understands that preparation isn't about comfort. It's about staying ready.